Dit is Argezoog Radio.
Een andere kijk op de wereld.
You're listening to Pateo Radio.
Welcome listeners to another episode of Pateo Radio. The guest of tonight is specialist in what we can call the platonic solids, the perfect three-dimensional shapes, and he even improved on the knowledge we had so far because he created a new special form, and we will talk about that intensively. But before we go into all the subjects of the three-dimensional shapes, I would first like to introduce my guest, and the guest is Mr. Frank Chester from the United States. Frank, please welcome into the broadcast.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm
really glad to be here.
Yeah, of course, but I'm really thrilled that you are, because it was only 1 week ago that I saw your video presentation you gave last year. I think it was in May, and you talked about what you call the Chesterhedron. We will talk about it later on. And I was so happy and thrilled by seeing what you explained. So my heart went open a little bit, and that is also related to the subject. But before we go into that, Frank, can you explain a little bit about yourself? Who are you, and how did you came across this subject of the shapes?
Well, I discovered the shape January 2000, but I had worked on trying to find it for 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. And so once I found it, then it just opened up work and discovery and interest and excitement that I never imagined would come from finding a seven-sided form. And I had a background. My college degree is in sculpture, so I was always involved in art. And then, of course, I've been a teacher, both in high school and colleges, for 32 years, and I was teaching architectural and engineering design, drafting and so forth, and so I had a background into working with form, and I was just luckily I had that because I needed that when I found the form. Yeah, well, I send the newsletter out every week. It's in Dutch, but the newsletter of last week, I spent a lot of effort in trying to explain what you actually discovered, and I think some of my readers also sent you emails and asking you all kinds of questions. So I'm sorry for that enthusiasm, but I hope you don't mind. But the way I see it is you discover that the highest form, so to say, of the 5 platonic shapes is the tetrahedron. That's the one with the least volume, we can say. And so we can also say it's the one that is closest to the world above, as I like to explain it. And when you open up the tetrahedron, instead of pushing on the corners, then there is space for another kind of face on the sides, the shape of the, how do you call it, the face? Yeah, the face with which you also make the kite of, the kite-shaped face. And that creates you call it the Chesterhedron, the seven-shaped form, seven-faced form. And can you explain a little bit about the kite shape? Because when we put 5 perfect kite shapes together, we get the pentagram. So it's also a very important two-dimensional shape. So maybe you can explain a little bit about those fascinating shapes. The tetrahedron combined with the kite gives the heptaedron, or the seven-faced shape. Yeah, the Chesterhedron is named the Chesterhedron because it's the geometry of the human heart, and so it's the only polyhedron that's
associated with our chest.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and my last name is Chester, and my dad's name was Chester, Frank Chester. My grandfather's name was Frank Chester. And my dad worked on the first heart-lung machine in the world, through his company that he worked at. And, I have a connection with heart problems. I almost died of a heart problem, and my two brothers did die of a heart problem before birth. And so there's a connection there, and I had no idea it would be connected to a seven-sided form, but there is. That's why I named it the Chestahedron, because it's a three-dimensional form of geometry in the chest. So the Chestahedron comes into manifestation through one of the Platonic forms, and one of the Platonic forms, the first one that comes in, is the tetrahedron. Now, the tetrahedron are four triangles, and it's also associated with the element fire, like earth, water, air, and fire. It's the first form that comes in three-dimensionally into the world. There's not another form that can come in before it. So, the tetrahedron, if you take and put it in a cube, another Platonic form, it fits in perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is if I take the tetrahedron and I put it into a cube, which I did, and then I vortexed it, I spun it, and when you spin this tetrahedron in the cube, less than 1 degree of arc, it turns into a seven-sided form. Now, the seven-sided form now has 7 faces, whereas before it had only 4. The tetrahedron has 4.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, when you turn this in a cube, the cube is a constricted space that the tetrahedron turns inside to, and it changes into a seven-sided form. And as you twist it, as it spins in the cube, the 3 new shapes, which are kite forms, start to grow. They start to get bigger. And there's a certain point in the twisting in the cube where the 7 faces now are equal in surface area.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, a cube has 6 squares, and they're all equal in surface area. And the tetrahedron has 4 triangles, and they're all equal in surface area. Well, the tetrahedron also has 7 faces that have equal surface area, but there are 2 different shapes. One is a triangle and one is a kite. And I have found that this movement that creates this seven-sided form is the basis of all the other Platonic forms. I call it a Rosetta Stone that's going through all the other forms that come into existence, whereas throughout history we've never known where these forms come from. And so that's been part of my research, part of what I've been trying to define with the seven-sided form is how it relates to the other forms. And it's been really exciting, and I found that they do.
Exactly, yeah. It's very, you describe in your presentation that you discovered this seven-sided form, as you call it, Chestahedron, in 2000, and it took you about 12 years to discover the whole systematics behind it and the relation with the other Platonic solids. So can you explain what did you do those 12 years to work? Where you're a sculptor too, so you also built all kinds of shapes, and I saw a lot of that in the presentation. So can you explain how that research process went on in those 12 years?
Well, I had a kind of a unique way of doing. I have a unique way that I applied this form to, and I applied it to the elements: earth, water, air, and fire. So if you have a solid piece of ice and you melt it, it turns into a liquid. If you keep melting or the heat going up, it turns into a gas, and eventually the gas turns into fire. So we have earth, water, air, and fire. So what I did is I studied those 4 elements. Those were transformations. They're transforming a solid to a gas, okay, for instance. So I studied the way that worked. And I found out that could put this seven-sided form through that process of earth, water, air, and fire, and in that I found all kinds of other new forms never seen before. So, for instance, if I looked at the form itself and I looked at the air element of earth, water, air, and fire reverses. So what I did was to try to reverse this form. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is I turned it inside out. And when I turned it inside out, I got another fantastic form. And so in all the processes that I took it through, okay, I found new forms that are coming out of this. And traditionally, we've taken the platonic forms and we've just cut the corners off. They're called truncations, or you push the corners, okay? And there are transformations. There are new forms that come out, and Archimedean solids are, a lot of them were discovered by Kepler. There are quite a number of them. Well, these are transitional forms. Mm-hmm. In other words, the form is being transformed into another form, and that's what I had done. But I did not take the traditional method of cutting off corners.
What is the method you used there, Frank?
What's that?
What is the method you use? You push the corners?
No, I turned it inside out.
Oh, you reversed it, yeah.
And then I would spin it. Okay, I would put it into a vortex generator that I made and found out what it did in the water. And I did a lot of different things like that to bring and find out what this form had inside it and what had it on the outside it. So I took a stellation. Stellation is kind of a word for making it a star. Mm-hmm. So I was able to take all the dihedrals off the surface of this form, and I came up with the first 7-pointed star. And then I took it another step further, and I covered the star with faces, and I came up with another beautiful form. So none of the I didn't follow the tradition 100%. I kind of deviated 50% of the traditional way into new ways. And of course that came from earth, water, air, and fire. So earth is everything that's different. Water is everything that changes. Air is everything that reverses. And fire is everything that transforms. So I found out how to use those 4 ideas and apply it into sculpture.
And what is the function of the ether form, the 5th form, the dodecahedron? You don't like to call it ether or prana or whatever, or akasha, but is there also a word like what you're saying, transformation is fire, reversing is air? What is the function of the dodecahedron then, of ether?
Well, the dodecahedron throughout history is, no one's ever been able to figure out what the heck it is. And so they've said, oh, it's a cosmos. Oh, it's the zodiac. Oh, it's the akasha. Oh, it's the ethers, the fire ether, whatever they wanted to say. I couldn't figure it out. And I looked at everything they said about it, but it never made any sense of how else it worked to the zodiac. The zodiac is a plane. It's a circle. The dodecahedron is 3-dimensional. It has, you don't have the different zodiac signs in a 3-dimensional volume. It's more in a plane.
Yeah, but
so,
maybe
that didn't
makes sense. No, I understand, but I think they focused on the 12 phases, and they thought the zodiac has 12 signs, so maybe there's the connection. But I agree, it's a 2-dimensional circle, and of course the dodecahedron is a 3-dimensional shape, so it's not really comparable. Yes.
Yeah, and I've also found that the dodecahedron. Okay, there are 2 sides to everything. So in relationship to my form, there's a pressure form, and then there's a suctional form. Mm-hmm. They're opposite. That's a reciprocal, which is known as air of the elements. So On the suctional side, anything that deals with suction, the cube and the dodecahedron don't fit. But the icosahedron and the tetrahedron and the octahedron all are on the suctional side, but they're also on the pressure side. But the dodecahedron and the cube are on the pressure side and not on suction. So what I found out is that the cube and the dodecahedron, since we're talking about the dodecahedron comes from a cube. What that means is that if you take all the edges, not the corners, but all the edges of a cube, and you press or cut them off, truncations, I'm using the traditional method, it turns into this zodiac type, cosmic type explanation of the dodecahedron. But the dodecahedron can only come from a cube. Now that's where it comes from, is a cube. And if you do the same process in reverse to a dodecahedron, it turns into a cube. It goes from a dodecahedron to a cube, or from a cube to a dodecahedron. So that is called a dual. And that dual is what happens here on Earth. So the cube and the dodecahedron are Earth-based forms. They're not based on the other side. They're not based on suction. So that was a big discovery for me to try to understand the dodecahedron. And the only reason I found that transition is because I studied pyrite. And pyrite is fool's gold. And it always takes the form of cubes or dodecahedrons. So I studied those two crystals, and I couldn't figure it out for a long time. I mean, I looked at this thing for years. And then I decided that why don't I, instead of looking at these things the same way, I noticed that there was a grain, like a wood grain, but with no knots. It was all a grain. I noticed on the cube that they didn't run, they ran opposites from each other. But the grain was on the surface. I couldn't believe it. So then I took the dodecahedron pyrite crystal, and I noticed it had a grain too. There was actual grain to the surface of the 12 faces. There was a grain, and also on the 6 faces of the cube there was a grain. And then I realized that there were 12 edges on the cube. So when I'm sorry, I mean edges.
Yeah, you're right. 12 edges on the cube, yes.
Yeah. So if I push the edges, and there are 12 of them, it makes sense that it turns into a 12-sided form, and it does, a dodecahedron. So those were the things that I never intended to study, but I needed to study to understand more about this new form, this gestahedron.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's how you can also see that there's a relationship between the hexahedron or the cube and the octahedron, because the octahedron has 6 vertices, and the hexahedron or the cube has 6 faces. So there you can also see the transformation, and the same is true between the dodecahedron and the icosahedron, because the dodecahedron has 12 faces, while the icosahedron has 12 vertices. So that's where you can see the relation, and yeah, it all makes sense when you look at the numbers.
They all relate to each other, right?
Exactly. You know? Yes. Yeah.
And those transformations are called duals. And the reason they're called duals is because you can put one inside the other, and then take that same one and then put it inside it. So it goes all the way to infinity, all the way to the center of transformations of one into the other, and that's why they're called duals. And that's very, very important. And of course, the dual of the chestahedron is a 13-sided form I named a decatria. Deca being 10 and tria being 3. So the decatria is a dual of the 7-sided form, and it fits inside the 7-sided form, and it also fits on the outside of the 7-sided form. And the dodecahedron, the decatria, also goes inside the chestahedron and outside, and back and forth and back and forth. So I also have a dual. But the thing is so interesting is that these duals in the traditional Platonic forms are all even numbers, whereas this form, the transitional form, are all odd numbers. So, we're looking at prime numbers here.
Exactly.
And then I also found from the Decatria, I found a 19-sided form. Now, another 19-sided form is also another prime number. Okay, so now I have 3 new forms never seen before on the planet that are they are perfect in that they have the relationship to each other. And so it's not based on some subjective thing where I take a piece of clay and cut all the corners off or whatever. It's actually they're coming from each other. So this is a whole new area. This is a whole new world that's opened up now into forms that we now have that we've never had before. So all 3 of these forms I just described have never been on the planet before, never. But they've been here, but no one has ever discovered them. I didn't invent them. I discovered them.
Exactly.
They're not off my design at all. They're objective, they're scientific, they're measurable, and so forth and so on. They're not based on any kind of subjective, purely a kind of an artistic expression of a particular person. These are completely independent of any particular person.
Yeah, it's very true what you say, Frank. And what I like also very much about your approach is the methodological way that you work in. You for instance, you take certain angles and then you stick to that angle, and by doing so, you make sure that the method is correct, and then you discover the next stage, so to say. And what I also think is very remarkable are the numbers you just mentioned, because I studied, for instance, the Mayan calendar, and there the number 13 is very important. And of course, we have 7 days in the week, and there are 7 chakras. So also the number 7 is extremely important in I think in maybe the world above, and we have a lot of references to help us remind that. But your Chestahedron is pointing us directly to the importance of 7.
Yeah, 7 is really important. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize it until after I started this. You're right. It's used in all the different religions in the world. 7 is an important number. The thing is that we, as human beings, have been somehow associated throughout our evolution that there is a number, there is 7, there is a number of 7, but isn't it interesting that all of these centuries and centuries and centuries that this form, this perfect 7-sided equal surface form, has never been discovered?
No,
you have to ask why. Why was that? Why was it discovered in the year 2000? Never before. It's not anywhere in history.
Can you
not that complex, is it? I mean, it has 4 triangles and 3 kites. I mean, it's not that hard, is it?
No, once you see it, it's not hard. But before you reach there, I had to do all kinds of imagination in my head to see what you did, and then at a certain moment, it struck me, and I start to see it. But of course, it's obvious the moment you see it. But before that, I think it takes some time to make your mind understand what is going on and what it is in fact that you see. So I agree with you. It's simple, but it's not simple to arrive there, I think.
Well, no, and another thing about it is that it has some really unusual qualities.
Mm-hmm.
Right in the middle of the form, there's a hexagram. That means there's a 6 sided flat, like a stop sign, which has more than that, but it's like a flat pancake with 6 sides. That's called a polygon.
Like the beehive structure.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yes.
And that's right in the center of this form. Right in the center of this form is this hexagram. You'd never ever imagine that would be it. So the Star of David is in the middle of this form, or Solomon's seal, or whatever, 2 triangles and a reversal, whatever. In whatever religion,
mm-hmm.
they use the hexagram in one form or another. It's used in all the religions. So in that, this is the center of the seven-sided form is amazing.
Yeah,
so these are the kind of things that have kept me very excited, why I keep moving, why I keep working on this thing constantly. I am today. I mean, it just doesn't stop. I'm in my 14th year, and I got another 14 years to go with this form because there's just so much to do that I can see there's so much more that I need to do with this form. And so I have, been in the process of finding some really very interesting things. For instance, this is really interesting. There's a guy that emailed me yesterday, and he said he made a chestahedron out of plywood. And so it had a quarter-inch, half-inch, or three-quarter-inch plywood that he used. And he wanted to know what the bevel angles were so he could put it together so it wouldn't be any gaps, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So he had to cut angles. Well, one angle was 43, one angle was I think was 52, and another was another angle that made up this form. I think it was 43 degrees. Anyway, there were three angles that he had to use on his compound miter saw to get that to fit. And what was so interesting is he found is that all of these angles, 43, all of them angled up and added up to 7.
Whoa, that's remarkable.
That is unbelievable. I mean, you can't listen. There is no way that a human being, I just use myself as an example, could have ever figured out anything like this. All we can do is discover it. And so in the discovery of this, okay, there was a form of geometry that I used, which means that it was drawn out accurately, okay, in geometry. Okay, so if you can find the geometry of this form, or you work with that form, then you get closer to where it's coming from. So it's like this. If you have a watch and you want to discover how this thing works, and you take it apart, you find out how it works, you understand more about the watchmaker.
Indeed.
You understand more the idea of a watch if you take it apart. Now, that's what I've done. I've taken this apart to try to find out what is the thinking, what is behind this form that I can, as a human being, understand.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's so exciting, is to discover these things.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's absolutely wonderful. And then, of course, the other forms I found, can't anywhere near work with them yet. I mean, the 13 is, one man has immediately said that it's the basic geometry of a beehive. And he was a bee expert, so I sent him the drawings, and apparently he's making these. I don't know what's happening, but I don't have time to do that. I still have much more to do with this seven-sided form, and the 19 is also a very beautiful form. And maybe someday, but the chestahedron, I've given that away. I put it on the internet. You can make it. Do drawings. You can do whatever, and it's not a secret. It's wide open. It's called an open secret.
Can you describe, Frank, what happened to you when you discovered the chestahedron and you realized the importance of this shape? What kind of emotion came on to you?
Wow, I mean, I can explain it in one word, and that's enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
Enthusiasm is based on warmth, okay? So it's definitely, a fire process. It's based on transformation. That transformation has really helped me as an individual to be able to see things that I didn't see before. Now, I see things that I used to have to draw and I used to have to make. Now I see things I don't even have to make it. I can I can see it already without going through that process. So because I've done all of this, it's allowed me to see in a different way.
Yeah, because you've made extensively number of shapes, if I understand.
Boy, have I?
Yeah, because
I have cut, bookcase after bookcase with glass doors just filled with forms.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do. I have to make, what I have found about my work is that everything that I did the first 40, 50 years of discovering this form, everything I did, every occupation, every job, every whatever, I needed it. There was a purpose for everything I did, and I didn't know that there was a purpose for what I was doing until I discovered this form. And when I discovered the form, then I needed to apply all the things I learned and didn't have to start from scratch when I discovered something. I already had the skills. I already had, the tools that I needed.
Yeah, the quality of experience.
I didn't rely on anybody. There isn't one person I've ever asked to do anything that I couldn't do. So I do everything. I know how to weld. I know how to do all the lathe work. I know how to use all the tools, and I didn't have to learn all that. See, and I learned it before. So what I'm saying is that if you somehow at a certain age decide that you want to do a particular thing, all the things that you did before will make sense.
I have perfectly the same experience, Frank. I'm a little bit younger than you are, but at a certain moment I also quit doing what I did and decided to take a totally different new course in my life. And I, just as you realize that everything I needed for that new course was already in me. I had the experience, I had the skills, I had the network of people around me. So I unconsciously I had prepared myself for doing what I'm now doing, and you had done exactly the same. So it's really remarkable. And the feeling you must have had must have been like mine, so that you have a kind of confirmation from your higher self, so to say, that you're on the right track and that you're doing exactly what you are supposed to do in this life.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, because it resonates with what you're saying, so I'd just like to share my experience, and but yeah, I can imagine that. And what I really like is all the effort you put in making all those things, because you had 12 years of work in making all these shapes and studying them, and then making a new one, making mistakes and learning from that mistakes. It must have been a very exciting process, but also maybe your environment must have thought that you went a little bit crazy after your retirement, or that you were. Is that the responses you got from your family or your loved ones?
Well, everything I've done, people have been very patient with me, because the only place I've been able to do this is in one corner of my living room, or the kitchen table. I don't have a studio. I don't have a space any bigger than a regular closet, walk-in closet. It's the biggest space I ever had. And I've been able to do all of this, in that living room. And so what I tell you that is that you don't have to have a studio with skylights and high roofs or anything like that to do your work, whatever it is, artistic or scientific. You can do it where you are. You don't need to wait or use an excuse for something you don't have. And I think that's an important thing for people to realize.
Yeah, I agree, Frank. I think the only limitations are the ones that you put on yourself, but if you don't restrict yourself, you can do the magical work that you showed us in what you've discovered. And everybody can do the same if you put your mind to it and you have a focus, you have a goal which you want to discover.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And after a while, you don't even have to think about a goal. It's just so exciting to see what happens if you do this or you do that or whatever. And I mean, you just become alive. mean, it's a wonderful life to have, and to be able to do all of this is just, there's nothing like it.
No, it's a kind
So
of
I
blessing.
gave up. I sacrificed. What I did is I gave up my personal freedom to do this. And what I mean by that is that when I retired, I could have gone fishing, or I could have gone getting a boat, or I could, do all these kind of things, take trips and do that. I sacrificed all of that for this work. And I did it willingly. I gave up my freedom to enjoy all the stuff that there is to do for this. And I never regretted it 1 minute.
And I'm quite sure that there are many people like me who are really happy that you took that decision, because I think your work is really a boost to discovering the relationship between shape, form, and you can say the way the world is organized, or the way the world is functioning. I don't like to go into metaphysics a lot, but to me it's very important to understand that there's even a world higher than this one. And I think the shapes are helping us to see how that higher world is organized, and how we can learn from that. What is your attitude towards metaphysics and shapes that are maybe not from this earthly living way, earthly world?
Well, the one thing that I kind of hinted on before is that the difference between suction and pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Pressure is based on matter, and suction is based on the spirit. And in between those two is this form. It's a transitional form. It's based on water. And if I expand the tetrahedron, which is the starting point, the tetrahedron, which is fire. Mm-hmm. If I expand fire, it goes into suction. And the same form appears. The first form that appears is the tetrahedron on the suctional side. And on the compressed side, which is the earth, everything here is based on pressure, to the center of the earth. If I put the form through pressure, it turns into the seven-sided form first. So the seven-sided form is on both sides, except that on the suctional side, it's bigger. And on the compressed side, or the earthly side, it's smaller. But it's exactly the same perfect, equal surface, seven-sided form. Now that's amazing. So what is amazing about that is that there's now a way to study the other side. The other side has form. The other side isn't formless. And we think just this side, the earth side where we're experiencing this, is the form. No, there's form on the other side, but you can't see them. So on this side, that we experience here on earth, okay, we can understand. We can understand through our efforts, but we can't see. On the other side, we can see, but we can't understand. So this is why it's so important to do this kind of work, to understand what's going on here, because we can take that across the threshold. But we can't take knowledge. We can only take the knowledge that we develop here, because across the threshold we can only see, but we can't know.
Yeah, what you call the threshold, some in ancient scriptures they call it a veil. You can't go through the veil with your senses, because at the other end of the other side of the veil you can't see, you can't smell, and so on. But you somehow can use logic to decipher it, to understand what's going on there. And that's in fact what you're doing with the creational, with the forms by sucking or pressuring it.
Yeah, that's right. And what's so interesting is that what I'm saying is that you can take across the veil or across the threshold, or whatever way you look at this. The only thing you can take across from what I've found in my research is capacity. The capacity that you develop here on Earth is what you can take across. You can't take money, you can't take cars, you can't take all this other stuff, that we do here, except our capacity.
And what can you give an example of that capacity? Is it kind of a quality or a skill?
Yeah, the capacity is potential.
Okay.
It's what you have discovered here, done here, that you can take across your experience, okay? And then if that experience is what you're going to be dealing with across the threshold, then it makes sense that we should try to develop our experience, our potential, our capacity here, in what we are good at, or what we have developed, or what we had decided to do when we came here. And if we get into drugs, okay, then when we go across the threshold, we're going to be drugged. We're not going to be able to have the capacity, okay, of clear thinking and lawful experiences that are not distorted by drugs. And I'm only using drugs, okay, as an example of not developing capacity, is we're giving it away, okay, and we give it away through all types of forms of dependency on something other than ourselves. So
exactly, because when we go across the veil or the threshold, then we don't have the same substances that can trigger what we think we know, and without that we didn't develop it ourselves, so it's no longer there. That's what I think you're saying here, Frank. Is that correct?
Yes. Across the threshold, apparently from what a lot of people have said throughout the centuries, across the threshold, okay, there are a lot of unlawful things that we experience. So the lawfulness of an experience on earth that we can take across as potential or capacity, then we'll be able to know, which we can't know, we have to bring our knowledge with us, we will be able to know unlawful occurrences or unlawful forms or unlawful behavior, that we can develop that here, so we have a foundation across. And that's why it's so important to try to find out what you are good at, what you think that you can give, because there's also the potential that when you go across the threshold, that they're on the other side are experiencing what you bring across as a gift. And what we do on earth here, they can't. If they are, whoever they are. Okay. That these are gifts that we go across. So we go across the threshold, and you say, well, I've done this and this and this. And they, and they say, well, that's fantastic. We can't do that over here. Now we understand. Something like that. Or you get across the threshold. So what did you bring? I said, well, I made $1 million. I got a really nice car I had, a big boat, and I traveled all around. I said, yeah, but what's the gift? I mean, what did you bring us? What did you help us that you learn from Earth? Because that's the only place you can do Earth things is on Earth. So there's another way of looking at it. These are different philosophies that come from different religions and so forth that you have to cipher through your own understanding of this to make it a reality for you. And everybody has a different reality. But there is a lawfulness in everyone, and there's a lawfulness here on earth as well as across the threshold.
I really admire what you're saying, Frank. I've talked to many people about this subject, but nobody has been able to explain it so practically, and I think it's also clear for the listeners that this makes absolute sense, and that's why we are here. That's why we have this life, to do things we cannot do in the other world. And if we waste this life by doing things that are totally irrelevant, then we actually waste a good opportunity, and that's a pity.
It is. I agree with you. And the thing, one of the things about working the way I work, okay, is that it is practical. Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of people, many artists are more into the fantasy side. They don't know what they're doing. They're self-expression, and they're painting apples and grapefruit. And that's okay, and that's fun and everything else. I don't mean to be critical of it, but we need to do more because we have the capacity to do more. And the idea that on Earth, we can only do Earth things. Okay, there's not an opportunity to do across the threshold what we can do here. Everything here on the Earth is absolutely a barrier. Barriers are everywhere, and those barriers, okay, is what helps us. So if we come into the world with a problem, say we come into the problem and we can't, let's say, we can't remember very well. We don't remember the things that we do each day. All right, because we have that difficulty, and it can be in school or when we're young or whatever, or when we're old and we still can't remember things very well. That is a problem. And that problem comes to life here on Earth. But that problem is your gift. That problem is what you came here to deal with. And you can only deal with it here. You go across the threshold, you can't. You can't develop your memory. So here you can. So when you find you have some difficulty that you're being criticized or whatever, any kind of a barrier that lines up in front of you and prevents you from going where you would like to go is a gift. And if you work on that deficiency, if you work on that problem here, okay, it's the only place where you can. And so that's our opportunity. So if we look for our problems, those are our gifts.
Yeah, this is very spiritual teaching you're giving now, Frank. I didn't expect that we would go this direction, but I really resonates with how I feel it, how I see it, and I think you're 100% correct in this. And so thank you very much for sharing this too. It's
sure.
Yeah. Great stuff. You say the coming 12 years I'll be working on the shapes again, the 7-sided shape, the Chester-hedron, but also the 13-sided shapes and the 19-sided shape. Can you give a little bit of idea what kind of work you're gonna do with those shapes?
With those other shapes?
Yeah.
No, nothing. I've done nothing, and the reason I've done nothing is I don't have time.
Okay.
There is no time. I have them. They're beautiful. They sit in my closet. This is why, you see, this is what I'm in the process of trying to develop a research center. And so far, in the last 2 weeks, it's interesting. In the last 2 weeks, I have been given the opportunity to open up a research lab in Silicon Valley.
Whoa.
And in California, where all Google and all the Apple and all that stuff is right in the center of that area. And I've also been given $5,000 to start up, but that's it. So the reason that I wanted to have this research center was so that people could come in and I could teach them how to work with this 19-sided form to find out what's going on, and the 13-sided form, and anything else like that through this process that I've developed. I still have so much work to do with the 7-sided form that I don't have time for it. But in a research center, I could direct people to understand these other forms, and they could take that understanding and apply it into other things that they want to do. So what I'm going to try to do is to get people interested in coming to this research center to do these kind of things. And I have a little plan that I have that how much I need for the next stage. I have 3 stages, what I have planned to do, and a certain amount of money that I will need. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but I do have a $5,000 startup fee where I can start buying some of the things that I need for these experiments.
Well, that's a start.
So that's really new in my life. That's something new that's coming.
Yeah, it's great. It sounds fantastic. It's a pity I'm living in the Netherlands and not in California like you do, because I would have certainly gone in. I do have a center now in the Netherlands, and I'm also wanting to create a science lab and helping people to understand what I call holy science of the whole, including the shapes and the relationship between the energy forms, earth, air, water, and fire, and so on. So it's fascinating work, and I think it's now the perfect time for this, because people have come to an understanding that the ancient scriptures were scientific scriptures. All the metaphysics is just science, but on a different level of understanding, higher than the physical realm, so to say. It's more profound, and yeah, I think you are helping us to reach that level through the very clear shapes, through the Platonic solids, because that's a perfect bridge to reach to the higher insight. So I'm thrilled with your work, Frank, and I'm happy that things are going in the right direction for you now. And you still
something's opening up.
Mm-hmm. And you still have the energy to do that, because you've passed the 60 now, I think, nearly 70. Not sure your age.
Yeah, I'm 73. I got a lot of energy.
Okay, that's great to hear. So
yeah, I'm not anywhere near that giving up. Oh no, I got way too much work to do.
Okay. So you're not wanted at the other side of the threshold yet?
No. I figure I need 33 years to bring. I've heard this, that you need 33 years to bring something into the world for it's grounded and established. So I've got anywhere from 19. I have 19 more years up for sure just to get to that point. And I plan on going that far. I have that much interest, and I'm not in any way slowing down.
Well, that's great to hear, and it was really music into my ears, because we need people like you to bring our understanding to a higher level. And as I agree with you, the shapes are a fascinating tool to do that, because they are self-explanatory. You cannot argue about, for instance, the tetrahedron. It has 4 faces and all angles are perfect. You can hold them any way you want them, and it's solid evidence, so to say. And when you can transform the shapes into other shapes, that's also very solid. So, and when you can go from the shapes we have on this side of the threshold into some kind of semi-metaphysical shapes, like the ones you found, for instance, the tetrahedron, then we have a perfect bridge, a perfect method to understand the bigger picture.
Yeah, well, I agree, and I really thank you for allowing me to be on your radio show, and that if I've inspired one person, that's worth all my time. And any time that I can do that, I do. And I give all my stuff away. It's on my website, frankchester.com. You can see everything. All the forums are all there, and lectures and so forth.
Yeah, I've put both sides in the announcement. Also your artistic science website, the link to that. Also to your video. So I'm reaching out to the United States as well. Not as big as in the Netherlands, of course, but also I have visitors from the US. So maybe people in California can be able to reach out to you and make contact. We also do a lot of webinars. I'm connected to the School of the Holy Science, and a lot of people from the US join in that webinar. So next time I'll do my own. I will also mention your work and your website. So I think that we'll create a lot of traffic, because there are a lot of people on this planet working on these new insights, this new understanding, this I call it holy science. And but we're all isolated, and it's time. I think it's now time to connect and share our insights. So because together we can do much more, all isolated on our own islands.
Yeah, that's right. So I appreciate your allowing the Chestahedron to become more grounded in the world, and you have done that by this station, this radio station.
Yes. A few more questions about the kite shape, because the kite shape is very fascinating to me. When you take the wooden sticks in the middle of a kite, you get the cross, the crucifix.
Yeah. You get if you take the Chestahedron and you do points only, not faces, but points only.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it turns into the 3 crosses. And it's interesting, which is the crucifixion. And it's interesting that the crosses touch at the top. Okay, the three crosses come together at the top at a point, so that means that the heads are together, and then the cross is the horizontal cross, all touch also. That means the hands are together. So we have heads and hands. We have the thinking and the willing together in this type of arrangement of the crucifixion in this seven-sided form. So also in that seven-sided form, or in that the crucifixion's configuration, you also have the six-pointed star in the middle.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And when you go from the top to the down, you first get the 0 point, the 1 point at the top. Then in the middle, as you described, you get the six-sided shape, the beehive shape, or the seal of Solomon, or whatever you like to call it. And then we go to the triangle, the Holy Trinity. So everything is meaningful at all levels as we go from the top to the bottom. So
yes, this is the geometry of the human heart. Mm-hmm. This is the feeling. This is the feeling life. This is the transformation of blue to red. This is the balance in the human being. It fits at root 3, which is the Vesica Pisces. It fits exactly in the middle of the chest, although it's off to one side, and I've explained that. Like in the heartistic.science.net. Okay, like you mentioned, I have 2 lectures that I've given to heart people, to doctors. Mm-hmm. And that's really interesting to see how this relates to our human heart. Not in a fantasy way. I mean, I don't mean fantasy, but not in a way that would be subjective. This is objective. This is actual, measurable, coordinates all the measurements to the human heart, the inside and the outside, the muscle layers, the way they move, their direction, the way the outside of the heart doesn't move as much and the inside does the spiral. And all of these things about the aorta, why the valves are the size they are, why they're designed they are, they're all designed on the Trinity, is coming from something that has been designed. The heart is not just some random thing that happened through evolution. It's designed. Absolutely. Cannot be anything but. And the geometry shows that.
Whoa, I've not done any research about the difference between the human heart and, for instance, a heart of a monkey or an ape. But did you do that, Frank? Is there a major difference?
I don't know. I've never studied that.
No. Okay.
I have no idea. I mean, I have found all these relationships. I'm a congestive heart failure. Now I can explain that geometrically. And I've found that through this study, all diseases and all things that are happening to us that are irregular are also lawful. They have an order. And so congestive heart failure is when the chestahedron is going back in its twisting motion into the cube and becomes more of a tetrahedron. And the tetrahedron is congestive heart failure. That's what the basic geometry is indicated, because the inside of the geometry of the chestahedron, which I have found, also changes its form, and that form is what causes the congestion, and its relationship to flow through the flow of water that I have studied. Well, the milk is also the same consistency as our blood, so I also have studied with milk. I started out with 7 sticks and a piece of mud, okay? That's how I started.
Yes.
And I wanted to make a 7-sided form, so I took 7 sticks and a piece of mud and stuck them in there, okay? And now, do you see what's come from 7 sticks and mud? So that's what I mean. You don't have to be sophisticated. You don't have to have all this great amount of funds behind you and all this kind of backing. You don't need any of that. And then look what can happen from 7 sticks and a piece of mud.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because what you discovered has not only implications for spirituality, like you just explained in this radio show, but also for healthcare, for medicine, for understanding the functioning of the heart, It helps us understand maybe a lot about the ancient scriptures, the relationship between the shapes and the energies, and yeah, it's if I mention everything it will take long, but yeah, I'm really thrilled, Frank, that you did this and that you shared it with the world, and yeah, I'm very grateful, very grateful.
Well, I'm grateful for you to expose this to people. I mean, this is really important. This isn't just some secret thing that's kept in some vault. I want this thing out there.
Yes, and you did. It's out there. You gave a marvelous lecture, and your websites are very informing about this. And I think many people are getting inspired, just like I do, to do much more work about this. When I saw your video, I immediately started to make my own pentagram and started to fold the paper to see if you are right what you tell there. And it's fascinating to see that everything is absolutely true. So
I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's great. But I also think it's important to do it yourself, because seeing somebody explaining things is important, but when you actually do it yourself, then it becomes inside of you and the knowledge becomes alive. And from that living knowledge, yeah, you can create much more knowledge.
Yeah, you're talking my language.
Okay, really great. Well, the time is nearly up, Frank. I'm thrilled that you were my guest, and I hope I made the audience just as enthusiastic about your work as I am. And maybe we can have contact in the future. I'm also happy that you agreed to be on the Pateo Academia. Your website is there in your name, so I'm sure we'll stay into contact. So thank you very much for being my guest tonight.
Yeah, and thank you for having given me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're more than welcome, Frank. All the listeners, thank you very much for listening to this radio broadcast. Next week, my guest is Santos Bonacci, and then we'll talk about astrotheology. Thank you very much.
There's a reason for my teaching, even though I can't explain. More than a dream that you are reaching, more than a laugh that shadows all the pain. A special meaning in the thorn of dreams, in the garden where a thought can blind me. 'Cause I am lost here, where it never gleams, where I found that I screamed so blindly, yeah. Until I rise up, fall down. Is this the reason that I can't feel the ground? Am I waiting for my tomorrow, or should I say goodbye? Am I walking with a purpose? 'Cause I feel the same. And as I wait for my dreams to surface, as I wait I'm drowning in the rain. Just when I thought.
Dit is Ergens Oog Radio.